Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophets Speak. We continue with our study of this extremely unusual and interesting chapter of the first book of Samuel, Shmuel Aleph, chapter 28, Perek Chav Ches, and we are at verse 15. At this point, we left this story at the end of the last podcast where Saul is at the place of a necromancer, a woman who raises the spirits of the dead. Um, he had requested that she raise the spirit of Samuel, of Shmuel. She saw the appearance of Shmuel, and Saul has now knows that Shmuel's presence is his ghost or spirit is there in the room, and now Saul and Shmuel are going to speak with each other. Remember that Saul is not actually seeing the vision. The necromancer is the only one that can see it. I'm reading the chapter now, this time, at its simple, basic meaning, and then we are going to devote a significant amount of time discussing how to understand this chapter from numerous angles and approaches. So, Vayomer Shmuel el Shaul. So Samuel said to Saul, so the ghost is speaking to him. Loma hirgaztani lahalot osi. Why have you made me angry and upset by bringing my spirit up? Or the hirgaztani could also mean to disturb, to disrupt. Why did you disrupt me or disturb me? Vayomer Shaul, and Saul said, Tsar li mi'od, I have a lot of problems. I have a lot of trouble. Uflishtim nilchamim bi. The Philistines are waging war against me, ve'Elohim sor me olai, and God has left me. So here's this hint of blame. God has left me. And think about the irony of this. In Saul's mind, now he's speaking to Samuel, right? Samuel has told him that God has left you, and you shouldn't be king anymore. But here he is saying it as if Samuel should now have some sort of I don't know, empathy or feel bad for him. V'lo ananiod, he does not answer me anymore. Gam bi'at haneviyim, not when I go to the prophets. Gam b'chalamos, not in dreams. V'ek ra'eh lecha, and I therefore called you lahodieni ma'aseh, to tell me what I should do. So Saul is saying, I don't know, I didn't have anything else to do. I looked to God first, and God didn't answer me. Vayomer Shmuel, and Shmuel said, V'lama tish'aleni, why are you asking me? V'Adonai sar me'alecha v'yehi arech. God has left you, and God has become against you. God has now no longer with you. And so that's the entire point. You're in trouble because God is not with you anymore. That's the problem. What do you want me to do about it? Vayas Adonai lo ka'asher diber biyadi. God has done, this means literally, God has done for himself the same way he spoke when he spoke through me. And what was, in other words, God has decided to do this for himself. Now, this is really important. What does that mean, God has to do this for himself? God needed to remove you from the kingship and replace you with someone else for God's honor, because you no longer served his honor. You no longer served the purpose for which the king of the nation of Israel is supposed to serve. And therefore, he has decided to take you away, just like he spoke to me. Right? Remember, Shmuel was the one who told Saul at the time when God did this. He said, the irony of this is Shmuel told Saul then, Chatat kesem meri, the sin of necromancy. The sin of doing exactly what you're doing now is rebellion against God, is the reason why God is taking you away. The irony that now, when we're about to read very soon, is going to be the death and final downfall of Saul, right? It's he's going to be doing this rebellion in order to try to get favor, in order to try to stay in place. And he comes to a necromancer. God has torn the kingdom away from you, and he was giving it to your colleague, to David. It's interesting how it calls him your colleague, reminding Saul that David is your friend. David is working with you. The spirit of Shmuel is telling Saul that David was with you and is with you. David never sinned against you like you claim, like you thought. Kasher lo shamata b'kol Adonai, because you did not listen to God. V'lo asisa charon apo ba'amalek, and you did not carry out God's anger against Amalek, right? God's hatred, and we discussed this in detail when we studied that chapter. It's worthwhile to go back and study that if you haven't, and listen or review those podcasts, right? That is why God is doing this to you today. That is why God is putting you in such a dire predicament. And by the way, not only are you going to suffer because you're going to lose your kingdom, your kingship, but you're going to take all the people will suffer with you. And here's note, like people themselves, the people of Israel, the armies of Israel, they're simply fighting the war along with their king. They're not doing anything wrong, but they're going to suffer because of you. Umachar, and tomorrow, atov anecha imi, you and your sons will all be with me. In other words, you and your sons will die. Gamet machane Yisrael, and the camp, the army of Israel, Yitein Adonai biad Plishtim, God is going to put in the hands of the Philistines. Vayimaher Shaul vayipol melo kamaso arza. Saul quickly, immediately dropped his entire body on the floor, and he was extremely afraid and scared because of the words of Samuel. Gam koach lo hayabo, he had no longer any strength. Kilo achal lechem kol hayom kol halayla, he had not eaten bread all day and all night. Again, we find him making the same mistake. Remember back in the story of the earlier fights against the Philistines when he made the people swear to fast. And his own son Jonathan said, to fast on a day of war? The people need energy. People need strength to fight. But Saul again thought that the ritual of fasting would somehow gain favor in front of God. Most presumably, this fasting that Saul was doing was part of his attempt to talk to God, part of his attempt to get an answer from God. But obviously it didn't work, because that's the last thing one should do the day before a battle, is to not eat. Vatavo ha'isha el Shaul, and the woman came to Saul, vatera ki nival miod, and she saw that he was extremely distraught. Vatomer love, and she said to them, Hine shama'ah shivchascha b'kolecha, your servant, your maidservant, she heard your voice. V'asim nafshi v'chapi, I placed my life in your hands. In other words, I violated the king's order right in front of the king himself. I listened to your words. Asher dibarte elai. So here now it's fascinating, because the woman sees Saul in this terrible shape. She can choose a lot of different paths here, but what path does she choose? Vi'ata, and now Shema na, please listen, gamata, even you, the king, should listen, b'kol shivchasecha, to the advice of your maidservant. V'yasima l'fanecha pas lechem v'achol, let me give you some bread and eat it. V'hivucha koach, at least you'll have strength, kitelech badarach, when you go out on the road. In other words, the least thing I could do, I see you're heading into this big battle and you're scared and you're afraid. At least let me give you something to eat. Vayima'ain, and Saul refused. Vayomer lo ochal. So even this necromancer, this witch, understood better than Saul what it was that he was supposed to be doing before the battle. He said, no, I won't eat, because in Saul's mind that would make it worse. Vayifritzu vo avadav v'gam, and his servants and the woman tried to encourage him and tried to urge him to do it. Vayishma l'kolam, eventually he acquiesced and listened to them. Vayokom me'aretz ve'eshav al hamita, he got up from the ground and he sat on the bed. The bed here is that's where they used to sit, to eat. V'la'isha egel marbek babayas, she had a calf, a stuffed calf, a fat calf in her house, vatemaher, and she quickly went, vatizbacheu, and she slaughtered it, vatikach kemach, and she took flour, vatolash, and she kneaded the flour, vatofeo matzos, and she baked it. So this is takes a while, all this preparation, this food prep, and But she went ahead and did all of this. V'tagesh lifnei Shaul, and she brought it before Saul, v'lifnei avadav, and before his servants, v'yachelu, and they all ate. V'yakumu, and once they ate, they got up, they left the home, v'yilchu b'laylahu, and they left in that night. All of this occurred in that one night. So, the woman gave them food to eat, to give them the strength that she needs. Somehow, this woman herself seemed to understand better than Saul what it was that he should do, what it was that he needed, and so on. Now, this concludes the reading of the chapter on its simple level. I tried to my best to stick to the words, to stick to the simple meaning, to stick to the actual story. Now, in the next podcast, I'm going to discuss numerous approaches to understanding what actually happened here and why I believe this chapter is so important and so crucial to understanding the message of the prophets, the central messages that the Torah, that the prophets are trying to teach us. Thank you so much for studying this together. Looking forward to studying the rest of this book of Shmuel together, and of course, the rest of the entire Nevi'im and Ketuvim together.